The quiet little village of Armoy, nestling among the low hills of North Antrim. A casual visitor passing through on their way to Ballycastle sees only a main street, several churches, and an attractive view of the River Bush. However, if you stop and look around, you will find a park dedicated to 4 motorcycle racers, of whom 3 are no longer with us: Frank Kennedy, Joey Dunlop and Mervyn Robinson. During the 1970s, it was here they prepared their bikes for the Saturday races, and at some time all 3 lived in or near the village. Collectively known as the Armoy Armada, their racing time together was cruelly short, with 2 of the 3 killed in racing crashes by 1980. Amazingly, in that short period, they created a legend which lives on today and has made Armoy Village a necessary visit for the true fans of motorcycle racing. This is the remarkable story of how the Armoy Races came from the past racing heritage of the village, but mainly focusing on the period 2007 to 2014. It features the local people who made the first race happen and then developed it into the success story it has become. The programme has been made to celebrate the 10th anniversary of the 2009 Armoy Race of Legends.
Early days, way back in 1970, I came to Armoy and met Joey and Frank and Mervyn, just young fellas in their early teens, interested in motorbikes. The motorbike was their life. So I had an AJS and they all had to go in that, and got better as the years went on. And 76, 77, they moved to Frank had a wee garage, they sold second-hand cars, and just in the outskirts of Armoy, it's just in the 30 mile an hour, since you come into Armoy, there's now a gospel hall.
Well, initially, whenever the great Joey Dunlop was racing, at Akadui in particular, I often referred to him, when he had so many wins, as the Admiral of Akadui. We also had a racer known as the Ace of Akadui. But whenever the other riders came along, Frank Kennedy, Mervyn Robinson and Jim Dunlop, collectively I renamed them as the Armoy Armada. And this seemed to tickle the people in North Antrim, and they had a huge following.
Well, as you know, my brother Joey, he was into the racing before I was only say maybe 12 whenever he started racing.
Well, definitely Joey Dunlop, because he's my hero basically. I watched my dad actually had the videotape of the road races, and I watched that as a kid as well, and all the old bikes. You know, it gave us, being on the Isle of Man, it gave us a big insight into road racing. Yeah, it illustrated it very well, so it certainly sparked an interest in pure roads anyway.
Here, I suppose the history of modern road racing really started with the Armoy Armada, the Robinson family, the Dunlop family obviously, and of course the Kennedys, and I think that their contribution as generations of motorcycle racers has been absolutely immense to motorcycle riding and to the enjoyment of mere spectators like ourselves.
Given the history of the place as well, the Armoy Armada and the Dunlops and all the rest, there's all of that, there's a sense of that in the air all the time as well.
For Armoy as a whole, and for the people around the village, because this is where the Armoy Armada was formed, and we come from around here.
Mega meeting to be involved with, first time the race is run, and and the history behind it, of Mervyn Robinson, Joey Dunlop and all the boys, the original Armoy Armada. It just, it's a bit of an honour to be involved with it really, and to be invited over.
Joey was deeply affected by the loss of Frank and Mervyn and was unhappy to be reminded about the Armoy Armada days.
Something that we were never actually allowed to talk about in our house. It was never allowed to be mentioned, but I understand how important it is for this area and that there, and I'm not too silly. I've known plenty about it all my life, so I know it's important for everybody else, but probably not too important for me.
It's kind of like a a big sort of deal for the Dunlop, I suppose, family, and with Jim, Robert and Joey, just sort of all been sort of around this area and that there, and you can see by the type of people sort of come here as well. It's like they're all old-fashioned, they're into the history of what happened before and that there, but for me and Michael, it's obviously doing what we do for ourselves then and making our own bit of history.
I suppose, you know, the idea really maybe stemmed from the fact that there was 3 young lads from Armoy whose names are on this that had raced and raced successfully, albeit ended in tragedy for the 3 of them.
Well, as I say, Mervyn left next door to me, Mervyn Robinson, and I started going to the races with Mervyn, and then, well, the whole Armoy Armada, there were Joey, Mervyn, Frank and Jim, and every Saturday we're away somewhere, you know. So then I started collecting these helmets. So I got Joey's first, and then Mervyn, he says to me, he says, "You're changing camp." He says, "You're going now to Joey," he says, "instead of along with me." Well, I says, "Right, you give me one of your helmets." So that's about away here 40 years ago.
The village has talked about the whole world over, and it was actually them boys, Joey and Mervyn and Frank, that actually did it.
It's all a long, long time ago, but I still happy memories of all the great days we had at Kirkerson and all these road races, and the camaraderie was there with everybody, the fun. We'll never ever see that again, I'm afraid.
We could suppose that over the 40 years, the idea of establishing a road race in Armoy passed through the mind of many people, but how it actually came about is a story in itself.
Yeah, it was actually started as a little bet down the pub between my cousin and myself. We had been down at the memorial to honour Mervyn and Frank and Joey and Jim, and my husband, we'd went for lunch, and my cousin, he says to me, he says, "Kathleen, I don't know what you're doing down there." He says, "Why don't you try and get a road race going? That would be more important." So I rang Mervyn Whyte Monday morning.
And I remember Kathleen making a phone call and then coming to see me. And really at that stage, what she wanted to do was to form a road race around the Armoy area in memory of the Armoy Armadas, I suppose, at that stage, as she kept talking about. What I did do then with her was to be open honest around it, where really what she needed to do first of all was to form a club and then affiliate that club to the governing body of the sport.
First and foremost, he says you have to form a club, and I went over all of this large sheets of paper about risk assessments and road closing orders and ambulances and everything else, and about how you go about forming a club. And we talked for about a good hour, maybe an hour and a half, and then we parted company, and I come home and I said to my husband about it, and I says, "Probably never hear anything more about it."
So I think she did go away that day maybe slightly demoralised and realising to herself, hey, listen, this ain't possible. I remember then a few days after having to think about it, just, you know, and thinking, hey, listen, you know, maybe it would be good just to make a phone call to her again and to meet up. So I did make a phone call to her. I remember doing that, and she was surprised.
It was Mervyn. He says, "Kathleen, could I meet you in Armoy?" And I said, "Yes, certainly." So he says, around 10 o'clock. And I says, "We'll meet at the school." So we met down at the school, and then he says, "Have you an idea," he says, "of anywhere exactly you want, what sort of circuit you'd want?" Well, I said I had. Yes, I says, I wanted the big circuit, what we call the big circuit, which was down the Grace Hill Road, up the Breakock Road and down the Drones Road. So him and I went round other different parts of round Armoy. Actually, we never did go up the one that has actually become the circuit today. We never went up that one.
And I looked at the two circuits, and to be fair, I wasn't overly sort of pleased with either because of the issues, the problems, the narrowness of the road, the obstacles, you know, and to get a road race there would have been very, very difficult.
"You find me 15 people," he says, "and I'll form your club." So that Wednesday night, 8 o'clock, all these people started coming down into the community centre, and I thought, whoa, whippy ding. And there was 35 there that night. And that's what Mervyn, he says, where did you get all these people out of?
So I was invited along to a meeting then in Armoy itself, and Kathleen took a meeting, and I can't remember, I would think there's probably around 30 or 40 members there, or 30 or 40 people who were interested in the club being formed at that particular time, you know. Bearing in mind that these are all guys who've been steeped in motorbike racing for years upon years upon years.
And Kathleen had arranged for Mervyn to come up, which didn't suit me, so I wasn't at that particular meeting. And of course, the next day, whenever I met Kathleen to see how she'd got on with Mervyn, she says, you're elected chairman, we're having a club, so she says, get on with it.
It's fair to say that because they had given us a lot of help with the Northwest 200 over many years, I was very, very keen to help them and to see it happening, and particularly when it's close to, you know, the Northwest itself. The guys themselves are, you know, they're great stalwarts of the sport. They're very, very keen, and they will do anything to see their event going. And their event has happened. I mean, it's going now for 10 years and it's just grown and grown and grown, you know. And probably, in my estimation, it's probably the best national road race in the country.
I was appointed chairman before there ever was a club. But we gathered them here and we appointed a secretary and a treasurer and everything else.
And I think Bill might have been asked more than once, but he took up the gauntlet anyway. And they formed a club. Bill was made the chairman, and very shortly after that, I became the club secretary and the race secretary as well.
Kathleen was very adamant that it shouldn't be the course that we're on, but it should be another one at the side of the village here, which in my opinion was far, far too fast. And there was an illegal race many years ago with about half a dozen of the young men from around Armoy, my brother Frank being one of them and Mervyn Robinson being another. And because of that, Kathleen had this idea that this is where we should hit the race, but it was really, really too fast and it was too long. Been hard to just work with.
Like my wife lives down in Armoy, or up one of these wee roads that they were going to have the race course on, but it was too long, and Robert said it would be too hard to marshal. It's hard enough getting marshals as it is, and that would be too long. So he went out run this other wee track, or he knew they tarred about this wee road, so me and him went in one evening and drove round it, and then went to the club and suggested that they look at that track. So that's the one they had then.
A lot of research. Of course, we didn't have any idea. We had a lot of help from a lot of people, the different clubs and MCUI. We took guidance on quite a lot of things, and it was just a matter of finding our way. Of course, after the first year, it was easier, but the first year was very... the first few 18 months in setting up the race for the first time was very taxing, because we didn't have too much of an idea of what we had to do.
Before I got involved with Armoy Road Races, I was involved with the Northwest 200 Club, and I helped them down there, and I was asked to come up and help them to get the first race going here. And I've been involved with the race ever since, so that was more or less just a bit of experience we're looking for the first race, to get it going from other clubs.
Well, the club actually started in the year 2008, September 2008. I was involved with the Northwest 200 before that, still am involved with them as a club steward. Come along to meetings, we got the meetings up and running, and through the MCA then we decided we'd run our first race in 2009.